Alright, so now we're going to look at adding and subtracting terms in which you have some trig functions. So I mentioned a while ago, sometimes you do have to have a common denominator. So we're going to look at adding and subtracting, and then of course once you do that addition or subtraction, then you need to look and see if you can simplify it in any way. And then again, it does say to leave it in terms of sine and or cosine. Okay, so the first one here, of course, we're asked to add, and in order to add fractions, you have to have a common denominator, which I clearly don't have here because your denominator here is sine, and this is cosine. So one thing you can do when you're always looking for a common denominator, and I mean this is even true for just numbers, you can always multiply your denominators together, and that will always give you a common denominator. So that's the thought process, the concept that you need to use here. So I need to just simply multiply these together to get my common denominator. So that's just going to be sine times cosine. Of course, you can just write them side by side. That indicates the multiplication. Okay, so rewriting this first fraction, if you compare your denominators, what you're lacking, here is you don't have the cosine. Okay, so I look at it this way. What am I missing? So I'm missing the cosine. So whatever it is that I'm missing, I need to take that and multiply it times my numerator. Alright, so my numerator is cosine, and I have to multiply it times cosine, so that will give me cosine squared. Okay, next, again comparing this denominator to this, what you're missing now is the sine. So take whatever you have in your numerator and multiply it times sine. So I have a sine times a sine, which will give me sine squared. Okay, so now that my denominators are the same, I can actually do the addition. But now, I can't physically add these terms. I mean, that would just be like you trying to add an x and a y. They're just different. So we'll just write it over here as cosine squared plus sine squared. Alright, so I do have it in terms of sines and cosines as my instructions ask, but there is some simplifying that I can do here. If you'll look back at your Pythagorean identities, and actually the one that we're going to use here is this one. Now the way I have it written in my problem, I have this term first. I have the cosine squared plus the sine squared, but with this being addition, it doesn't matter which of those two terms is written first. It's the same thing. So these two added is the same thing as just a positive 1. So that means that I can just replace my numerator with a 1. So I have simplified it as much as I can simplify it, and it is in terms of sines and cosines. So there's your answer to that one. Okay, next one. Still looking at the adding and the subtracting. Alright, so what you need to consider here is that this second term is understood to be over 1. So as I mentioned to you a while ago, you can always find a common denominator just by simply multiplying these terms together, but of course the fact that this is understood to be over 1, you probably already realize your common denominator is just cosine. Now your first fraction has the denominator that it's supposed to have, so you just transfer the numerator down as it is. Nothing changes there. But now with your second fraction, you have a 1 and you need it to be cosine, so you're missing cosine. So multiply your numerator times cosine. Okay, so again I end up with a cosine times a cosine, so that's going to give me cosine squared. Okay, now that I have a common denominator, I can bring this together into 1 single fraction. Now I can't physically subtract these, they're not like terms, but I'll just have to bring it over here as 1 minus cosine squared. Okay, now on this type of problem, one thing that I see students want to do is they want to start canceling the cosine squared and the cosine, kind of like I did the sine squared and sine a while ago. But you're not allowed to do that on this one because you have this other term. As long as you have addition or subtraction connecting your terms together, you cannot go in and just cancel out just a portion of it. Okay. Now, there is a step that would be considered simplifying it. I mean, it's going to make the answer look a little simpler. Still going back to your Pythagorean identities, if you notice my numerator is 1 minus cosine squared. So right here I find that 1 minus cosine squared is equivalent to just sine squared. So I can replace my numerator with sine squared. Now, making that substitution, I still can't cancel anything out, but like I said, it makes it look like it's a little bit simpler, and it is in terms of sines and cosines. So that would be your answer for that one. All right, so there's a little bit on adding and subtracting. So what I want to look at next is how do you do some multiplying? Okay. Now, I've got a parentheses times a parentheses. There's 2 terms in here. There's 2 terms in here. So that's a binomial times a binomial. So what you have done numerous times, like in an algebra course, is just your FOIL method. That's what you have here. You're just simply going to FOIL this. So starting with your first term, I have cosine times cosine. So that's going to give me cosine squared. And then I have cosine times negative 5. And now I have positive 2 times cosine. And positive 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. Now I can combine the 2 terms in the middle together. Those are considered like terms because the cosines are to the first power. So you just simply add or subtract the coefficients. So I've got cosine squared. So negative 5 plus 2, so that would give me a negative 3 cosine theta, and then minus 10. So that would be your answer for that one. So that's simply just your FOIL method. Okay, next one. Okay, this is still multiplication. Of course, this time I just have just the one set of parentheses to the second power, but as we have seen in an algebra course, this is just the same thing as having 2 of those binomials. So it being to the second power means that you multiply it times itself. So just write it down twice, and now do the same thing that I did a while ago with my FOIL method. So cosine times cosine. Cosine times negative 2. Negative 2 times cosine. And negative 2 times negative 2. Okay, 2 terms in the middle again are alike. So that would give me a negative 4 cosine. And plus 4. So that would be your answer there.